Hi everyone, and welcome to Latinx YC, where we discuss all things related to US politics from a Latino, Latina, and Latinx perspective.
Buenas tardes. Hello, everybody. How are you? This is Cecilia del Cid.
Hola Ceci.
Hola, Clemencia. ¿Cómo estás, mi amor?
Hi, and my name is Clemencia, and I'm founder of Moira Studio, an ad agency that specializes in political advertising for Latinos.
And I work in environmental science and social justice practitioner.
Awesome. So, what are we talking about today?
Well, we finished 2 of our first episodes, and we were having a couple of conversations about what feedback we have received. We have talked about what things are resonating with people and what things aren't resonating, and we are trying a new little approach today.
Yeah.
Aren't we, Clemencia?
Yeah, so we're super excited to let you know that now we're going to be running this podcast weekly instead of once a month. We had a lot of feedback that people saying, we want more.
Yes, and people were looking forward to continue the conversation, and sometimes to have that kind of those threads of thoughts and ideas that are flowing and coming up. We decided to do these more often. That also means that we're changing the format a little bit.
Yes.
So we are having.
You're looking at us too, our beautiful faces.
And we are also, in order to make this as fun and as exciting for both of us, the reasons that we decided to do this, to have these conversations in general was because we could have honest discussions in which we can show some of the things that are still questions for us, so it would be a little more organic.
That's right.
So we welcome your feedback and also your grace and kindness. We will try to hold each other accountable, and we will try to be as transparent and honest as we have been in the first 2 episodes, but we will definitely be having more of a conversation amongst friends.
So bear with us. We're gonna sort of freestyle a little bit, but this is kind of fun.
Yes.
All right, so let's get to it. So today we're going to be talking about a little bit of a downer topic, but it's necessary, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's so important.
I wouldn't say it's a downer.
Yeah.
No, it's maybe a little bit more serious, but I think it's important, as you were saying.
Yeah, and it affects so much because what we're trying to think is kind of structure what are all the different aspects of the relationship that US politics and Latinos have. And this is such an important one because it really can inform how Latinos have been voting for all this time. So we are talking about voting for the American dream and how systemic assimilation has affected Latinos over generations.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would say that we're also talking about how those systems, as you're saying, have affected us for generations, and also how we can dismantle or think about the system better so that we can become more active participants in our political process, and also in our community development process, I would say, to become a more unified voice or voter bloc, if you want to think about that way.
Yeah, and in order for things to change, what we need to do? We need to dig deep, bring those things from the darkness into the light, and shine some light into some issues that may be kind of icky to look at, but they're necessary. And transparency is such key in bringing change and kind of moving around some of these things inside of us to really say, you know what, that I don't like that. I want something different.
Yeah, I think sometimes you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So transparency also is, you're saying we wanna be transparent about what we might know, what we might be thinking, but also transparency is fundamental for equity. Because if we kind of lay out what we are thinking, or how we're doing things, or how we're spending money, or how we are organizing, like that allows for people to know exactly what they should expect. So transparency, so we have that element in which we shed light into things that might be blind spots of ourselves, of our community, but also is something that we have to learn to exercise like a muscle.
Yeah.
So that we can incorporate it into our daily practices. If you are an entrepreneur, if you're an employee, if you're an organizer, whatever element of our life is, transparency is something that is fundamental for us to achieve equity and achieve justice, right?
That's right. And our theory here, so we're going to start this by saying our theory is that one of the reasons why Latinos vote the way that they do, and why it's so hard to reach Latinos, is that because each and one of us is at a different level of the assimilation scale. So we've been talking and mentioning what is assimilation. So Ceci, what is assimilation?
So I think if we just look at some of the definitions from like dictionary, it's a process where people of a culture learn to adapt to ways of the majority culture. So it's something that happens obviously when you come up from being in the dominant culture and move into a new kind of like the new setting, right? So for me, I would say as an example, I grew up as part of the dominant culture in Guatemala. I am not member of an indigenous group, for example, or I'm not member of an Afro-Caribbean group in Guatemala.
Which are
I'm not an
minorities.
immigrant which are minorities in Guatemala, which are marginalized groups because they might not be minorities, in particularly in my country. In other countries they might be. But when I come to the United States, I become part of this minority group. So assimilation is that process in which now I have to adapt to that larger group's culture, right?
Yeah, but there's a difference, right, between, because you can have an acculturation, right? Which might be a little bit of a healthier way, but then there's the assimilation, right?
So acculturation, the way it's also defined is like if you belong to a minority community in a country and you are able to retain parts of your own culture. I would also use the word integration, in which you are allowed to show up as your whole self, right? With your language, your custom attire, if you come from a tradition that wears, I don't know, like a specific attire, and you can bring all those pieces of you and still learn the new culture. In which you are, like, I think assimilation for me is a much more violent process, in which in order for you to be now part of the new group or the majority culture, you have to cut off pieces of you. You have to not use your language. You can present yourself like you would present yourself within your culture. You cannot wear religious symbols that sometimes represent you. So like you're trying to strip yourself of everything that identifies you as other.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And you're also kind of putting down that culture that you came from as is lower or lesser, or
I think
and
that is a process that the dominant culture wants us to feel, right? I don't know if we begin in that point when we are kind of devaluing it, but I do think that through the process we begin to see it as less worth it. And I think generationally, let's say if you're an immigrant who came here and then you have a child here, that child might feel that there is different values between the culture at home when you speak another language and the majority culture, what you speak in schools, what you speak when you are in public spaces. So I think that there might be a different valuation of culture as generations kind of integrate or assimilate. Hopefully they will integrate.
Yeah. Yeah, so integration is it's just like a healthy way of being an immigrant, no matter what generation, and still love and respect where you came from.
Yeah.
But still be able to function and succeed in this new culture that you live. But what has been happening is the opposite, which is in order to function in this dominant culture in the United States, Latinos have had to completely forgo of their previous cultures and just become that new culture and just completely erase. And we even talked about this in our previous episode about the language, right?
Yes.
So many second and third generation Latinos that don't speak a lick of Spanish because their parents didn't teach them, because they didn't want them to have an accent, or they didn't want...
No, or because the school, like professionals, the teachers were like, the child is not moving fast enough or is not learning fast enough. Don't talk to them in Spanish, only English. And then...
That's even more violent.
And I want you to think what that means, right? To deprive you of the possibility to connect with your ancestors. So let's say that you live in a multi-generational household, like you have a grandparent, your parents, and let's say they're not gonna learn the language like a child is learning a new language. And then a teacher says, ma'am, sir, or do not speak to your child in your language. And then how are you supposed to breach? How is that person, how is that new, that child, that person be able to remain connected to the things, to your ancestral culture, to your ancestry, to like your history as an individual?
Yeah.
And also think about that we do that. I would say, once again, speaking of Guatemala, I would say that happens to indigenous people in Guatemala. We talk about it, this happening to us here in the United States when people tell us speak English, don't speak Spanish. But in Guatemala, we also tell indigenous people speak Spanish. And we make fun of indigenous people that speak Spanish with an accent, which is
a colonization.
Yes. So when we think about these processes of assimilation, they're not only about migration and place, they're part of a larger picture of colonization and other systems of oppression that we will continue to talk about as we explore what are the things that are deep underneath it, right, that guide us as we become voters in the United States.
Yeah. So, because we are not talking about them, we're talking about us, we are going to put ourselves through this and let's do a self-check, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, where are we in our self-realization of assimilation in this country?
Yeah. Do you want to share first? Do you want me to share first? What would you prefer?
I can share.
Okay, tell me.
So in my journey of self-realization, I think I've been in different levels, and I think I speak with my hands. I can't de-assimilate that. So I realized that probably some years ago I was on a 8 probably scale. I was
so 10 being very
10 being very assimilated.
0 not assimilated.
Obviously, I speak Spanish. I love my home country. I love Colombia. But there was something about, working with Latinos that every single Latino always says, oh, Latinos are always late, or they don't pay, or they try to regatear.
Yeah, barter.
Yeah, like, it's just like all of us are always saying that about ourselves, which obviously perpetuates the issue. So, it was always like this thinking of like, oh, in my business, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't work with Latinos because they don't pay, or they this and they that. And it's like, or thinking that, working with white clients was, I made it, I was accepted, and the white people are seeing me no matter what color I am, how my hair looks, or if I speak with an accent, they still want to work with me. I've been accepted into this white American world, and I made it. And I realized I was like, assimilation almost complete. I realized that at some point in my life, and I said, why do I keep hitting this? Why do I keep putting my own culture down? I am a Latina. I am not late. I pay on time. I pay a fair pay to everyone that I work with. I never try to regatear anything. I play it straight, like they say Latinos don't. And I know that there's many Latinos out there that do the same thing. And so it's just such an unfair overgeneralization that we have bought into.
Yeah.
That is not helping. It's not helping our cause. It's not. And it's also like, if we keep thinking that that's how we do business, then guess what? We're giving each other permission to act that way too, because it's expected of us.
Yeah.
And we can do better. So so there's different times in my life that I felt more or less. I feel like I'm feeling a little bit better on my balance of my original culture, and also loving this new culture that we have created here in the US, because we are definitely not the Latinas that we encounter back home.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a time very early on in my life in which I said, man, I go to Colombia and everybody calls me la gringa. And I'm here and I am the Colombian. I lived in Spain for a couple of years and I was the Yankee. So I'm like, who am I? Where am I from? Like, what's my identity if I am not one thing or the other? So, and the answer is neither.
Neither,
right?
And all. And you're all those parts.
We are a combination of all those parts, and it's such a beautiful thing to really realize that, because finally then you're like, okay, I have an identity, I belong somewhere, and the only thing is that we just need to celebrate that new fusion that we've created of those two cultures, and how they're always interacting together, and what we're creating of it. So
yes,
it is definitely, I feel like now maybe I'm, between 5 and 6. It's like a good middle point.
Thank you so much for sharing that self-reflection. I think as we began to prepare for this conversation, I took some time to think about where I was in that kind of totally made up scale of 1 to 10, right? As I shared before, I came to the United States as an adult, I would say as a young adult, specifically to go to school, specifically knowing that it was for a specific period, for a specific reason, and I came with a cohort of other international students. So I think that shaped how I enter initial experience in the United States was shaped. And I think because I came to a place that was very much white, but that had been
Where did you come?
I came to the Berkshires in Massachusetts, which is rural Massachusetts. It's a beautiful place. I came to study environmental sciences, so it's beautiful for that, but it was very white and very rural. I grew up in Guatemala City, so I was pretty much a city girl. Guatemala City is one of the biggest cities in Central America. So I felt like, I was living in a village. Like there's
the boonies.
The boonies, totally. I was like, I am, you know, like no, like and I thought it was so strange that people asked me about how I lived in Guatemala, when to me they were the ones that didn't have all the amenities that I had in Guatemala City, right? Like I could take a bus everywhere. I had cars and discos and movies, like all the amenities of a cosmopolitan city I had in minutes. I didn't have to travel an hour and a half to Albany, or 3 hours to New York City, or 2 hours and a half to go to Boston. Like I had it all the time. I grew up with it. So to me, and for them to think that Guatemala was a place that was, oh, do you live on the trees?
Yeah. Do you have cars?
Yes. Do you have cars? Like, oh, the volcano is erupting. Are you running to the water? Like, I'm like, which one? We have 33 and 6 of them are active. So like, stuff like that. So I think I came to the United States in that very specific context. And so I didn't have and to families that were host families to this specific program. So they weren't they had a lot of experience with students from these places. So I think that they didn't have a lot of like some of that initial preconceptions. But when I came back, so I left, I graduated, I went back home, and then I decided to come back and finish my associates. I think I did not begin my assimilation process until later on when I entered grad school. And I think it was in academia that I felt like I needed to really sharpen my writing skills. Like even though I had graduated very fast with a great GPA and from very fine institutions before, I knew I could write in English, but I didn't, I needed to always work at it, right? So it's when I begin to think like they can, it never occurred to me like my classmates could barely speak English and could barely speak Spanish and comfortably put in their resumes that they were fluent in Spanish. But I had to have perfect English to be considered at the same level, right? I have seen people get jobs that should be for a person who is Latin American, but are given to people from here because they have
even if their Spanish
a semester. Even if their Spanish is not good, even if their cultural awareness is not that good, even if they had a semester studying or working somewhere, right? Like, not just happened to me, I've seen it happen to other colleagues and other professionals. So I think, and it's amazing because education, and I talked a little bit before about school and element like K to 12, but education is one of the biggest tools to promote assimilation. And even higher education is not a place in which, and I studied specifically Latin American history in undergrad and with my sciences. And I think one of the things that I was always very aware is like, I wonder what is the difference about learning Latin American history in the United States and if I would have taken Latin American history at the university in Guatemala, or if I'd done it in Mexico or Colombia. Like, what would have I learned different? How would have that history been presented to me? In a very different framework, probably, right?
Yeah.
But there is this valuation. There is this value to have learned it here, and I had that awareness. I think, I don't know if it was very intentional, but I remember just having that thought. It was like, how would this be? How would this experience be different if it was happening somewhere else, if I was studying this history from another perspective. So I think for me, I would say the same thing with you. I probably about a 4 or a 5. I think I have done in the last 5 years a lot of work to try to put all those pieces that I've had spent the previous 10 years carving away, cutting off, and that were really harmful for me to like erase, trying to put them together again so that I can show up to places as my whole self with this story, my personal story, who is of a person who has lived here for half of her life and in somewhere else for another half of my life. And I hope that I get to experience living in other places for other moments of my life. I remember thinking, and I'll say this, quickly, that when I was here as an international student, I remember the coordinator saying, you come from Guatemala and you have your your yellow glasses. And when you come here, people here have blue glasses, and you look at the world through this lens, right? Yellow or blue. And when you become an international student, you put, or you live somewhere else, you put your blue glasses on top of your yellow glasses, and you tell people, oh, but it's green.
Is it green?
And people in Guatemala will say, no, it's yellow. And people here will say, no, it's blue. But now you have those two filters. And depending on how much time or how assimilated you are, you might think that it's a bluish green, or you might think that it's a very lime green, If I would have gone to Guatemala and not come back, that experience had transformed me regardless of whether I went back home or not. So I think we just have to recognize that as we make the transition from one place to another and from one culture to another, we bring certain pieces and certain pieces will change. But the idea is that we change because we're growing, not because we're being asked to cut them off.
Right. So what's your verdict? What's your scale?
I would say probably about 4. 4 in the middle. I think I still think a lot about my language and my accent. It's been a process. I think a lot. I think one of the things as we were making the shift to this new format and this conversation, thinking like, what is it going to be to make a mistake and to have to be accountable and to have to correct it? And what if I read something somewhere and I don't remember where I read it and I can cite it correctly, or I cannot give you the exact quote, because so those things I think very much from academia, and this idea of are you taking content from somewhere? Are you not given the appropriate credit? And if you're having a conversation with a friend, having this more organic interaction, you don't always have it at the top of your tongue, at the tip of your tongue, and you're okay, let me get back to you. So those are things that bring me a lot of anxiety still.
I don't know about you, but I used to hate when Americans would say, oh, where's your accent from? It would make my blood boil, because it would be like, does that mean that I'm not speaking well? Or, I would just be very hypercritical of my accent.
Yeah.
I'm like, I've worked so hard to perfect this accent. Why are you, highlighting the fact that I have it?
Yes.
and so it was always very frustrating to me. But it's funny how, speaking another language for us here is not really an asset, but for Americans to speak 2 or 3 languages, it's amazing. And then look at all the possibility of jobs that you could have. But for us, it's like, isn't this an accent? I mean, I speak 2 languages. And the fact that I have an accent means that I speak more than one language, which is, as I'm sure many people out here that are listening know, it's really hard.
Yes.
Speaking another language is really hard.
And also remember that language frames for you what is possible and is not possible. like anyone who speaks more than one language, you know that there are things that cannot be translated. So your language actually defines reality for you. And I think,
Yeah, like that movie, right? Like that movie that
Yeah.
if you start speaking the language, then your reality changes. Yeah.
yes. So if you speak more than one language, you begin to realize that there are things, terms that describe feelings and emotions and concepts that you might have like suspected and had no vocabulary for them, but that now you do. So I think for me, that question, the accent, doesn't bother me as much as when people will ask me where I'm from. Because technically, before I speak, like if someone says, give me your, like if I go to the bank and they say good morning and I said, here's my license, and I pass the license, there is no reason to assume that I'm not from here and raised somewhere else and that's where my accent is from.
Yeah.
But that idea,
Or because your name is
yes.
not.
Yeah, and I think for me, that question, like about my name, much more, I find it when people were like, oh, the last name, and I was like, where is that one from? And I'd be like, here? And because technically it can be, right?
I know,
and
people
then,
are like, where's your accent from? I'm like, Miami. I'm like, it's from Miami.
yeah, but you know, for me also, I love, the more I began to travel through Latin America and to get to know other people from Latin America here and realize how different our accents are, I began to feel such a joy and being able to recognize that everyone has an accent. Everyone. When you leave your region, like if someone from Massachusetts, from the Berkshires, goes to the South, they have an accent.
Oh, yeah.
And like, so they have an accent. People within Massachusetts have accents. Like
Yes.
the Berkshire
Everybody
accent
knows about the
is
Boston
not,
accent.
but the Boston accent is, you know, it's even regional. Not everyone
Yeah.
who is from Boston has it.
Yeah.
And not everyone who is from Massachusetts has that accent. And so if you go, let's say if someone from Massachusetts goes to the South, or, you know, or to the Midwest, you will hear their accent and they will hear your accent.
Yeah.
Right?
But so let me throw this back out there to the listeners. You know, there is that connotation that if you have a heavy Southern accent, people think that you're uneducated,
Yeah.
right?
And those have
And
to
that
do.
hurts. I'm sure that hurts for all the people out there that are from the South. They either think that, oh, they're so cute, or they're dumb. In we feel the same way. Just because that we have an accent doesn't mean that we're uneducated.
Yeah.
You know, it means actually the opposite. We know another language as opposed to other people. So it's like, let's throw it out there too and do kind of analogies here, because I feel like some people within the United States feel discriminated because they have certain regional accents, and it's the same thing.
Absolutely. And that is linked to another system of oppression, which is elitism. And I think that, you know, we will talk about it, but we don't have that much time left. And I want us to keep us on time. So this was just a quick introduction about what we are thinking to begin to discuss as we explore why we vote and have been voting the ways that we do as a collective group, Latino, Latina, Latinx.
Yeah, because elitism is part of the assimilation, right?
Yeah. You want to portray yourself to have moved up in life for some reason, right?
Yeah.
We will talk more about that.
Yeah, the closer you get to the source of power in your mind, the more powerful you feel. In your mind.
Yes.
Not in reality. It's all in your mind.
I mean, and there is a reality about passing, about having certain things, about performing in certain ways that brings you closer to power. But the truth is that there is other ways to be empowered that don't require you to strip yourself of the connections and the parts of you that make you who you are.
That's right. So that's the time, right, Ceci?
Yeah, that's the time.
All right. So we hope you enjoyed this new format, and
I hope
we
so.
have so much more to discuss in this topic, and so this is probably gonna be like a 3-part thing.
Yes.
We have so much more. We're gonna talk about elitism, how assimilation started in our countries, colonization, and how is that affecting the Latino vote? How is that going to be affecting the Latino vote in the next election? Yep. So we hope you enjoyed this. If you like us, please subscribe. Now the podcast is now on Amazon, it's on Apple, Spotify, all of the things. And if you want to leave us a review, you can leave a review on Apple. We also created a new Twitter account, is Latinx YZ Pod. I haven't posted anything there yet, but if you want to tag us and leave us some sort of a review, we'll love that. And please tell your friends and write us. Tell us what you want us to talk about. We have lots of opinions.
And we want to, explore the thoughts or comments of the community members that feel disengaged from the political process, that do not know how to engage with the political process, but I would like to. So we're here to explore all these thoughts and ideas. So any suggestions, please let us know, leave us a review, and share with your friends and family.
Yes. I make political ads. Well, my business makes political ads. So I want to hear from you. I want to hear what you'd like to see more in the ads, because, the campaigns are hungry to know. So let us know.
Yes.
Write to us.
Excellent.
All right.
Well,
that is
thank
all.
you, Clemens. Yeah, it was so nice to see you.
Besitos.
Abrazos.